Well, welcome. Thank you for coming to our Crystal Matrix talk show. We love doing this. And today we are discussing Mercury Retrograde, the good, bad, and the ugly of it, I guess. So I'm Patricia Bankins. I'm the owner of the Crystal Matrix. I'd like to go down the line and everyone can introduce themselves, if you would, please.
Okay, I'm Richard Simon Kahn. I do astrology readings here at the Crystal Matrix. And being a Virgo, I'm ruled by Mercury, so I have a lot of experience with Mercury Retrograde.
Awesome. My name is Madeline Rose. I work the front desk at the Crystal Matrix. I also do astrology readings and crystal healings. I am a Gemini Virgo rising. So I am ruled by both planets that are ruled by Mercury, and my sun is conjunct Mercury. So it's just Mercury, and my boyfriend's a Virgo too. So it's just all the Mercury in the world. I've lived through retrogrades in the way that you haven't experienced. So I'm here to help represent that.
We know Mercury.
Yes, exactly.
Nice.
Yeah, through and through.
I'm Ayamanatara, and I teach various things here at the Crystal Matrix. And I believe Mercury was retrograde when I was born, so...
Yes.
I guess I should throw my astrology chart on.
Sure, yeah.
All right, I am a Pisces with a Libra moon and a Virgo rising, so I have a lovely balance. And most of my planets, including Neptune, were in retrograde when I was born. So I actually enjoy retrogrades and get a lot done. But we are here to discuss and help those that have difficulty with Mercury retrogrades, or to laugh with those that have fun with it. Either way, we're good. So I think I'd like to start my first question on the floor here is, what is a Mercury retrograde? So... either of you, anyone.
Okay, Mercury Retrograde. Good question. Mercury Retrograde is the time period that takes place 3 times a year when the position of Mercury relative to the Earth appears to move backwards because of the position of Mercury in the solar system and its relationship to Earth. And so it appears to move backwards, and this energetically, this creates a time period. So there's several other planets that also do retrogrades, but Mercury does this 3 times a year. And when the planet is retrograde, its energy is not having a direct impact on us on Earth, and so it's kind of like a backing off, that things are allowed to flow. There's kind of a release, and it's a different reversal of the energy. And so retrogrades for any planet are basically considered time periods to kind of take your foot off the gas a little bit and maybe pay more attention inwardly rather than outwardly being focused. You want to add anything to that?
I think one of the biggest misconceptions that I get a lot in the front of the store too is that people will be like, oh, Mercury's going backwards, it's retrograding. And it's not, like you said, it's not actually moving backwards. It's kind of that illusion that happens when you're on the freeway. This was the way that it was described to me, and I was like, oh, it helps. It's kind of when you're going and one person starts to go really fast, and then all of a sudden you start to go at the same speed of them, and sometimes it looks like they're going backwards. And that's kind of what the retrograde is it's just in its orbit, it isn't going at the same pace that it has been, and you're going at the same pace again, and so it starts to look like it's pulling back. And again, it's kind of that reversal. It's almost like when you start to kind of do like, you go forward a little bit when you're driving, you're like, oh, I was supposed to make the turn back there. It's kind of like a go back to re-examine those past experiences that you've had and to kind of review the things that you may have missed when the planet was going forward.
Yeah, and from a visual standpoint, Mercury's revolution around the Earth takes place very quickly around the Sun every 77 days. And so when it reaches the elliptical part of its orbit, that's when it usually looks retrograde. And from our standpoint on Earth, if you see Mercury in the sky, it appears to be moving backwards, and that's where the retrograde comes from.
Yeah. Anything you go?
No,
all right.
That was pretty clear.
So Mercury seems to have a lot of, it has a bad reputation. I mean, people go, oh my gosh, we're going into Mercury retrograde. and we're all going to die. So why does it have such a bad reputation? Is there any truth to it? I think that's really, you know, is there any truth to it having a bad reputation?
Well, I've experienced that. I think in our day and age now, Mercury retrograde seems more intense than it has maybe a few hundred years ago, because Mercury rules communication, and it also rules any transportation devices, anything that kind of gets us to the place of getting our expression out. And because we're such a communication-based society, I mean, we always have been as human species, but because we rely so much on devices in order to do that rather than just our words, I think it creates so much more turmoil than it has, because, you know, we lose our car keys, which, you know, we use almost every day if you have a car. Or, you know, your cell phone breaks, your computer's not working, you know, you send an email and you send it to the wrong person. And those are such things that are so ingrained in our daily habits now. They're not just so like, you know, oh, I sit down with you and we had a miscommunication, that it feels like such a more intense time for us in 2018.
I think also, we, in our society, we're very go, 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 go. And we sort of expect things to happen on the schedule that we've planned. And why that makes sense to any, that's actually going to work at any point in time is beyond me, but because, yeah. So when the universe essentially goes, stop, shh, which is Mercury retrograde to me, people freak out, because but I need to be over there and I need to get this stuff done, and all of my shortcuts have stopped working, and it makes people crazy.
Do not hinder the person. I said, do not hinder the person.
Right, yeah. It's you have to do everything slowly, deliberately, and consciously during a Mercury retrograde. The Americans hate that. And yeah, it's interesting. I have some astrologer friends overseas that don't get nearly the freak out from people that we do here in this country. We are so focused on everything must get done and everything must get done now.
So what I'm hearing you say then is that maybe it's what Mercury is doing is it's affecting our self-will.
Oh yeah, totally.
Well, I'd like to add, there's two dimensions to this. One is, how does Mercury retrograde affect us individually? Because Mercury is the planet that rules communication. It also rules the mind. And what tends to happen, you know, to some degree or another during a Mercury retrograde is that our thinking gets a little less fuzzy. It's like the energy of being focused, this American focus on doing.
That's what I call self-will.
It's like the focus kind of gets diffused, and so we often are not quite as clear in our thinking, and that's why we end up misplacing things or losing things or making the wrong turn. And you'll see, like, I could usually tell when Mercury goes into retrograde if I haven't been following the stars, because the way people drive here in LA, you know, that you'll see people signaling to make a left turn and they make a right turn. And, you know, this kind of thing, that the brain and what we're engaged with isn't always syncing up. And so that's one dimension of Mercury retrograde. And then the other dimension is just the energy of how it affects devices, as Madeline was saying, that we depend on electronics, a lot of electronics, and I've worked in the printing industry for many years, and it's just amazing to see how when Mercury goes into retrograde, equipment will break down more frequently. And it also seems to be in proportion to the importance or the time frame that it's needed. The more urgently a piece of equipment is needed, like a copier, that you need to make copies for some meeting or something that's happening, the copier will break down right when you're trying to make these copies right before a meeting that you're going to have. You know, it's not. And maybe it's coincidental, but it seems more than that. And so things show up in how these objects function, because especially our technology, is actually very sensitive. The electrical currents going through all of these devices, there's a real sensitivity there, and so that seems to be one element of it. That mechanical or electronic things are a little bit more prone to not work properly. Your internet connection, your phone, and different things. And then we ourselves may not be paying as much attention, and so this is where the self-consciousness, the awareness comes in.
Okay, so there's a word that I keep coming back to while you're discussing this, and that is the illusion. You know, is that Mercury isn't really going backwards. It gives us the illusion that it's going backwards. And when you're talking about the more important, that you might think that getting this job done, or the more importance one might have on using this particular tool or this piece of equipment, the illusion of its importance and the illusion of us getting it done might be really what's up here. So is Mercury then, is it somehow drawing us into perspective, to introspection, to see where we're suffering from illusion?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is that?
Yeah, I think so. You know, you said, you know, so it's our self-will that's tripping us up. And yeah, our self-will, our ego, and I use ego in a broader term than like Freud would, but our ego to me is the part of my brain, your brain that goes, that all boils down to, it's not enough, you're not enough, there'll never be enough.
Negative ego.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, so the negative ego is what kind of generates our attachment to illusion in general, right? You know, because, you know, it's not enough, there's enough, there's not enough, you'll never be enough, it's illusion.
Limitation is always an illusion.
Right.
Okay.
And yes. And so we have to literally step out of the illusion during Mercury retrograde.
Right.
And that's the frustration, because we have so much attachment to the illusion.
Right.
And we've attached so much importance to all of this stuff that doesn't matter. You know, and if you just would relax and let it flow and just be present, everything works itself out. And we don't like that.
You said a key word there too. That one of the things that they say in connection with Mercury retrograde is retrograde starts with RE, and that almost any word that begins with RE is appropriate to a retrograde period. So relax, review. It's an excellent time for reviewing things. It's not an excellent time for starting a new project, because often your thinking isn't really clear, you're not getting everything, but it's a good time for doing review. It's a good time for doing research.
Or to redo something after
redo something. And if that's often the case, that when people push, you know, and this happens, you know, our American drive to do. So, you know, Mercury's in retrograde. I don't care, we have to get this done. Well, a few weeks later, a few months later, you find out, oh no, we've got to redo this because something was left out, and we've got to have that in there. And so it catches you one way or the other. If you don't work with it, it's gonna kind of pull your tail later on. But anything with re in it is a really appropriate use of the Mercury retrograde energy, because it's a good time for doing that. Research, renovate, thinking about redoing your house.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because you had said, like, it could, you know, some people see Mercury as such a bad thing, but it's bad from the perspective of, well, because I want to do this, I want to move forward. But instead of seeing it as bad, see it as, well, where did I leave any loose ends? Like, also another a part of retrograde is relationships. I found that every Mercury retrograde I've had either like exes come up, I've had old friends come up, family members come up. It's like those areas of your relationships, a reconnection, exactly. Yeah. Where did I not end this on a term that felt good for both of us? What work do we still have to do in this life? Because that's the other thing. People will come up into the Mercury retrograde. I'm like, oh, we didn't complete our karmic stuff that we were supposed to do. So, you know, at first I'm like, why are you back? And then I'm like, oh, because Mercury is saying, hey, let's really close this chapter so that you don't reincarnate in the next lifetime. Another reincarnate, back with them again, take this month and a half to do this now, And in the same way with the projects as well, it's like, I did not think it through. I thought it through, but I signed a lease during Mercury Retrograde of last year in December, and I was like, there's some times where you just have to just let it go. And the 6 months that I lived at that place, it was just like every turn along the way just didn't work, and it didn't work because what it is because I was thinking about this. It's like the foundation, the Mercury Retrograde foundation is just not strong enough because there's not an alignment. Because as humans in our bodies, we have to have an alignment between our ego, between our body, between our mind, and between our spirit. And Mercury kind of just shifts all of that so that you can understand the different components of each one individually, so that when you start to move forward, you're more, everything's taken care of. It's not just like
this.
Exactly.
Like
Yeah. So take the time of Mercury to say, okay, what parts of myself within those are not taken care of? Because it's, you've got this slowness. It's like, well, what part of my physical body that, where did I tear a muscle and I kept working out over it? Instead, let's take the time to do physical therapy.
Repair.
Exactly. Exactly. What part of your bodies are not in alignment when you have this time to slow down? It's good. It's not bad.
No, not at all. So one of the questions I had then was, why do you think people have difficulty with Mercury retrograde? I feel like we've really kind of answered that. But what do you think we could do, or what would you suggest to help people? Natara.
Sorry. It's just, my focus on Mercury retrograde is always, okay, so what do I do? I hear all of these things about what do I not do?
Yeah.
What do I do? And to me, Mercury retrograde is that time that we're always asking the universe, could you just slow down for a sec and give me a little bit of vacation? Well, you get that 3 times a year. It's called Mercury retrograde.
Yeah.
And what Mercury asks us to do during that time is to stop, breathe, ground. Okay, how did I get here? How did I get here? Are there any loose ends, like you said, that need to be tied up? Yeah, review. Once all of that is taken care of, then I can start to look at where I want to go from here. Not doing it. Mm-hmm. Look at it. Mm-hmm. I am here. I've come from this point. Where do I want to get to, and what makes sense to me about what the next steps are, and really think through that. And as I'm looking at how did I get here, a lot of that contemplation for me is internal. And on top of everything else, because the energy slows down so much in Mercury retrograde, it's a great time for manifestation, believe it or not. Don't do stuff in the physical world. Make things happen. Because when the energy slows down, it thickens. And so what I focus on, I feed. And it's so much stronger during a Mercury retrograde that wherever I'm putting my energy, I'm generating stuff, which is why I'm always trying to get people to not have a negative impression of Mercury retrograde. Because if you think the world is going to end, guess what? If you're in a high manifestation period and you're focusing on the negative, you're going to get more negative. So focus on making things happen. Focus on, what do I want my life to feel like?
Realignment.
Yes. Yes.
Well, we forget that communication not only has to deal with this communication, it controls how we communicate with ourselves. And so this is also saying, where is it that you're communicating with yourself that is projecting it out into your real world that isn't making you happy? Where are there areas of your life where you're seeing things bounce back at you and you're like, how can I change this? How can I change this? Oh, I can take this time to say, I can actually change this all in my mind in the way that I'm saying these things to myself.
Richard, any thoughts on this one?
Oh, I think that was beautiful. Yeah.
Hey, Madeline, you brought something up because Mercury retrograde is a 3-week period, but you said month and a half. So could we explain that?
Definitely.
All right.
So there's a pre, during, and a post of Mercury retrograde. So there's what we call the shadow time. And there's it's the time where it's beginning its retrograde, and you're kind of having this hovering time where it's moving forward a little, it kind of hovers, and then it feels like it's going backwards. You've got the time of it going backwards, and then it kind of stops, hovers and move forward. The kind of the before and after of that is like the preparation for it, but it's not. I personally find the shadow aspects are the times of the best time for preparation. It's like that week before you're about to give birth. It's like the ultimate nesting time. It's like, how can I make sure that the ducks are aligned before this really happens so that I have kind of all the necessary tools around me. It's like when you're preparing for a bath, it's like you really want to make sure before you get into the water that you've got, your candles and that, you've got, you haven't left the fire on, the stove on. And it's like you kind of just set everything in alignment so that you really can take that time where you go into the water and you have that introspection. There's not going to be anything that's pulling your attention away from that time that's important for you. That's how I look at it. Yeah.
Richard, you want to?
Yeah, and for instance, in this particular Mercury retrograde, it's going to take place in the sign Leo, and let's see, it starts at 23 degrees Leo. When Mercury goes into retrograde, it's at 23 degrees Leo, and so it stations at that point. This week before, what Madeline's referring to, this is kind of like the shadow period where it starts slowing down, and then it actually stops at 23 degrees Leo, and then it moves backwards. Over the 3 weeks, it moves backwards to 11 degrees Leo. So it's going backwards from the standpoint of Earth, back through Leo to 11 degrees. Then it's going to station for a day or two at 11 degrees, and then it's going to start moving forward again. So you get this shadow period of where you're recovering the same territory that Mercury went over as it backed up. Then we go forward with it again, and it's kind of like it's giving us a new chance. It's a renewal, another RE. There's a renewal there because then it's moving forward, and we get a chance to redo or to approach things with hopefully a more grounded and clear understanding of what we're moving forward with than we did the first time that Mercury covered that. Because in the pre-retrograde period, Mercury went from 11 degrees of move forward to 23 degrees before it started moving backwards. And for whatever reason, the universe wants us to experience a little bit more of this energy of Mercury in Leo. And what does that have to teach us? What do we need to learn there about ourselves and our experience in life and how we approach things?
Yeah, I actually find that the end shadow period, what I always think of as the wake, like the wake of a boat. I always find that to be much more difficult than the retrograde itself because I'm going back over all of that ground we just went over twice now. And so I'm doing it. Yeah, so this is the third time, and at that point, there's something I hate repeating myself, and so at some point, I'm just like. I'm fine during the retrograde, I'm fine leading up to the retrograde, and then that wake at the end, I'm like, nothing's working. That's really when I just want to go hide somewhere. So it's interesting though that it's in Leo this time around, because if you're supposed to be introspective and it's going to mess with your ego. Yeah, Leo's all ego. Oh, crap.
Not a lot of introspection there.
No, so yeah, this is going to be fascinating. I'm curious to see what happens at the national level.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a bunch of planets in fire signs especially when it starts. We've got we've got 4 planets in Leo, and then also that the Mercury and the Sun are making oppositions, strong oppositions. There's strong relationships to other planets, and so the part of this focus, Leo, and this for us on the West Coast, this is also happening in the 5th house of the chart, which is the house ruled by Leo. And so it's like everybody's home, and the Sun is in the 5th house. So this is kind of like the time to shine. This is a fire sign. It's expressive. It's creative. We want to have fun. We want to relax. We want to enjoy life. And so at the same time, it's an opportunity for us to look at how we do that and what we can learn about. Okay, what really does make us feel good? What really helps us to recreation is another word that falls under this. And so how do we find our recreation? How do we bring ourselves, how do we renew ourselves, how do we recreate our energies and put those into motion. And part of the opposition here that's happening is Mars is in Aquarius. Mars is in Aquarius opposite the Sun and Pallas Athena, and Mercury is making an aspect to Vesta in Sagittarius, another fire sign. So we've got all this fire going that's really calling on our creative instincts and calling us to play, so to speak, but at the same time to be observant, to be aware, to be conscious, because this is Mercury rules the mind, it rules the intelligence, and it rules communication. So to be more aware of how we actually move through the spaces and what we learn about ourselves and our interactions with others, that there's a real focus on this. Yeah, it's a very interesting summer energy.
So could this particular Mercury retrograde then be asking us to really look at where we suffer from illusion? I mean, we've talked about this a little bit, but because there's so much focused into this particular aspect right now with all the other planets in retrograde, and it's focused in the ego of Leo, is it maybe asking us to, and I'm just saying this for the audience so that we can look at this to say, how can we benefit anyone that might be watching and listening to us? Could this be about, maybe this would be an excellent time where it's demanding us, I think, really, to look at the illusions that we might have around the mind and the ego itself.
Yeah, one of the things, that's very good, because also Leo tends to be a somewhat self-centered sign, and Leo can also generate a lot of sense of pride. That our pride may come into play here. That especially with Mars in opposition, that we may. Fiery. Yeah, it's a little fiery. 2 days after Mercury goes retrograde, we have a full moon. And so that magnifies feeling, that magnifies our feelings. So the beginning of this Mercury retrograde, the first few days could really get rocky, because when our feelings are magnified by the full moon, we react. We're not thinking, we're just feeling and reacting. And we've got this very fiery, energetic Leo energy there. And we have our pride. We believe that we're right.
Well, it's magnified by the full moon and fed by the ego. This should be lovely.
So it's going to be a lot of fun. And if there's some parties, you'll have a great time at a party. But watch out that either your ego gets wounded or you end up being the person who wounds somebody else's ego because everybody wants to get it out. This is fire energy, so it's very expressive, and it's going to be a dynamic time.
There's a directness to the fire energy too.
Yeah.
Well, and isn't the full moon paired with a solar eclipse this particular
Yes, it
full
is.
moon?
Solar eclipse.
So yeah, more ego craziness and revelation and
well, and bringing up what's hidden, looking out from underneath what's hidden.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because throughout all of 2018, all three of Mercury retrogrades are in our fire signs. So we already experienced Mercury retrograde in Aries. This Mercury retrograde is in Leo, and our last one is in Sagittarius.
Nice.
And so I was looking at that, and I was like, oh, wow. And then I was thinking about 2018 and also what's happening globally. And I was like, a lot of this is learning how to not put our foot in our mouths. And how are our political leaders putting their foot in their mouths? And again, how are their words in conjunction with the alignment of their bodies? And where is there a sense of illusion with the action of kind of that fiery thing? It's like, exactly. It's like, well, people are doing this. It's like, well, are they really? But you just said that, and so we believed you because you had so much fiery conviction. So this retrograde is actually making us say, okay, yeah, you said that with so much passion, but is that real, or do you just feel that so much? Yeah. Well, and so then I was like, okay. And then I was like, I know someone who's also Leo rising, our president, who is his 12th house and his first house are both in Leo. His first house intersects Leo just by, I think he's at 29 degrees Leo, so at the very end. So he's barely a Leo rising, which means that this Mercury retrograde Mercury is going to be traveling through his 12th house, which is the 12th house has a lot to do with conclusions and closing chapters and ending cycles. And so I got this hit. I was like, oh, this is going to be a lot of him saying stuff that's going to end his legacies in different ways.
And the unconscious.
Exactly, and the unconscious. It's like, again, it's like, how is he saying things that are coming from an egotistical state that are making people go, yeah, 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 and other people go, oh, that's done with. You went way too far. And it's like, yes, we know that he's gone way too far so many times, but this time, this retrograde, I just kept seeing it's like, there's really going to be a lot of like this going on, because at that point, you know, it's like you can't say those things without consequences. And I think that's what this is showing, is that with that Leo energy, you have to, the retrograde in Leo is going to show us, no, there's going to be a consequence for your egotistical behavior. You're gonna butt heads with someone at some point, you know.
That's really good, because there's another interesting element to the astrological chart of this Mercury retrograde. The whole period is that Saturn, which has to do with consequences, the planet Saturn is in Capricorn, and it's at 3 degrees Capricorn, and it's making a square to Chiron at 2 degrees Aries, and the wounded healer. And Chiron just went into Aries last month, and this is calling forth our questions about leadership and our own leadership and the leadership of others that we look to for leadership, and or the lack thereof. What's the quality of the leadership? And Saturn is making a square. It puts tension there. It puts pressure, and it is about the consequences and examining, for all of us to examine the consequences of putting forth what kind of leadership are we putting into our own lives, what kind of leadership are we being served by those who we look to as leaders. And this is going to go throughout the whole month of July and into August.
And wouldn't we also say what kind of leaders we want to be?
Yes, well, that's what I mean.
Okay.
It's our own leadership, how we show up as leaders in our own life, whether it's in our families, in our work situation, or anywhere else that we're in a position where we're providing leadership, that it's giving us an opportunity to look at that and to define that more clearly. Saturn helps bring this energy of getting clarity about things, but it also is related to the consequences of expressing that Chiron is in a fire sign. It's in Aries, so it's very expressive, and just feeding off of all this creative fire energy that's being generated during this entire period. The sun is in Leo this entire period.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I was just reading this article that the federal court ruled that the kids that had been separated have to be put back together with their families. But there was recently a statement from Trump's side saying that they need more time to do that. And it just gave me, it was like a very interesting, I was like, oh, we're about to go in this retrograde and they're asking for more time to do this. And it's almost like, it's like that pedaling back on, if you say things, how are you acting? How are you gonna follow through with your action? Which, again, another planet that's in retrograde right now is Mars, which is the planet of action. And so there's all of these, with all the other planets that are retrograding, as we prepare for this Mercury retrograde, the final step of that is saying, okay, where are you having to backtrack on this? How are you able to backtrack spiritually? How are you backtracking physically with your action? And the final point is like, how are you backtracking with your mind to really say, I can't go forward until this, and this is done, you know?
Could we touch on, because I know there are a number of planets in retrograde right now.
Yes.
A large number.
Yes.
So, and we have time for that, and then we have time for some questions. But could you touch on which planets are in retrograde, and shortly, like what do they represent, what that might mean to us? Go. It's like the hot potato.
Okay.
That's right.
No backpedaling.
I've got the list here. Should I do it? Okay, well, let's see. Starting from the top, we've got Saturn. This is as of July 25th. Mercury goes retrograde. We haven't specified that.
Yeah.
July 25th.
Oh, thank you. We did.
Yeah, at 10:03 p.m. on the West
Okay.
Coast is when Mercury technically goes into retrograde.
At 10:03?
At 10:03 p.m., July 25th. and that's 2 days before the full moon, and I think it's a lunar eclipse on that full
It
moon.
says solar.
Yeah. No, it's a lunar.
You're right, no, you're
Yeah,
right.
the
It's a
solar eclipse is
It's
a
a lunar rather.
the new moon.
Lunar.
Is it
Lunar?
new moon?
Oh,
Because
okay.
you can't, there's also a solar eclipse, but you can't have a solar eclipse on a new moon because there's no moon. You can have a lunar eclipse.
Well, the sun is going to be eclipsed though, correct?
It's the
Right,
sun.
but, so, they alternate. So during the new moon, you'll have a solar eclipse because you can't eclipse the moon because there's no moon.
Okay.
So this one's a lunar eclipse.
Yeah.
All right, all right.
So,
I don't know why I would question you, but.
So starting at the top, Saturn is in retrograde in the sign, Earth sign Capricorn, and Saturn usually represents responsibility, defining things more clearly. I'm just going to give a simplified, short explanation here. And in retrograde, it's giving us a chance to kind of look at things, to see how we want to show up, and particularly about the structures in our life, our habits, our daily habits, and how things are built, how things are structured, what our ethics are, our integrity. And so being in retrograde, it's backing off a little bit so that we could examine this. It's going to be in retrograde until September. The planet Pluto is in retrograde in Capricorn as well. Pluto brings to the surface that which has been suppressed. It's about transformation, and so we as individuals, and especially Pluto, is a much more of a collective energy. It's a transpersonal planet. We as a society, we as a global society, are in the midst of huge transformations. And right now, Pluto is kind of backed off, being in retrograde, and it'll be in retrograde till I think November. And so this is giving us a time to assimilate some of the changes that are taking place on the planet and in our society, so we could see more clearly where our bearings are and how we want to go forward with things. Neptune, planet Neptune is in retrograde. Neptune has to do with our intuition. It has to do with spirituality. It's in Pisces, so it's what we feel. It's our awareness, our sensitivity to what's going on within us and around us in the world. And again, being in retrograde, it's giving us a chance to take it all in and see how do we want to respond to the situations that we encounter in life, and where do we want to be spiritually? How do we connect spiritually to be more centered and to be more grounded?
Quick interjection too,
Yeah.
Neptune has a lot to do with fantasies and illusions as
illusions.
well.
Oh, yeah.
So with this pairing of the Mercury
Right.
retrograde and the Neptune retrograde, again, it's a lot to do with where are we falling into a space where we're convincing ourselves of things that aren't true.
Yeah, and this is super strong. That's really good. This is super strong because Neptune is not only adding to that, but Neptune is in an easy aspect. It's in a trine aspect to Jupiter in Scorpio, which is another water sign, another water planet. And Jupiter is expanding our awareness. It's expanding our understanding of things. And in Scorpio, it's making us aware of things beneath the surface, bringing us into awareness of things below our ordinary level of consciousness, so we can see more deeply what is motivating us, what's going on. And it's aligned with Neptune, so the sensitivity, you may find that there are things that are, depending on where this is falling in your own charts, that it's bringing up things that you're having to look at and recognize within yourself, that there are feelings and there are issues that you have not really looked at before, but this is now they're coming into your awareness, and this is a really good time to work with them, to transform them. There's tremendous opportunity here, but that's just going to be surfacing, and so if it's unconscious, then it's going to be messier. And that goes on all summer. That trine between Jupiter and Neptune is going on all summer, and then also one of the things I thought when I saw that is that this is also about escape and about that people will be drinking a lot this summer, because you've got the two water signs. You've got Neptune as the planet of escape, and you've got Jupiter as this planet that wants to expand and have more and more and more and more and more. And so you put those two together in water signs
And add in the fire signs too.
add in the fire signs, and add in good old American advertising. So there's that. Let's see, we've got Chiron. Chiron, the wounded healer, is also in retrograde. And so Chiron makes us aware of where we are wounded, and also of where we are bringing forth our strength as healers, is our ability to heal our own lives and to bring healing to others. And so we're getting a chance to, again, integrate our experience so that when that goes direct, we're going to be able to step forward in a stronger way, doing the work that we're called to do. And let's see, and then Mercury, of course, will be in retrograde, which represents our mental processes and our communication. And so we're getting a chance to back off and be more aware of what's going on, so we can be more focused when it goes direct. You guys have anything?
No, that's good.
Yeah.
So between now and November, we're busy.
Well, it's especially this summer. This is going to be, we're going to have the most retrograde planets during July and August.
All right.
There's 6 to 7 planets in retrograde. And then at the end of August, well, first Mercury will go direct on the 18th of August.
Oh, on the 18th.
Yeah, Mercury goes direct on the 18th of August. And that will be just a week after the new moon and the partial solar eclipse that Tara was talking about. And then Mars, another week later, Mars goes direct on August 27th, 9 days later. Mars will go direct. Mars has been in retrograde for about 9 weeks, I think. And so Mars going direct will definitely energize our forward movement. And then in September, Saturn goes direct, and by October, November, you've got more planets going direct. And so, but especially with Mars going direct, it's really a signal to, okay, it's time to stop thinking about and kind of doing the reconnaissance that you were talking about, Tara.
Another read.
And really starting to put it into action, putting into gear. Mars is saying, okay, Mars is in Capricorn. It's a Earth sign. It's pragmatic. It's practical. It wants to have definite goals, definite steps on how to move forward. And when it shifts gears, that's giving us the signal that, okay, it's time to move forward. Get into gear, move forward, make things happen.
I think the one thing I wanted to add too is the fact that we have 2 planets that are retrograding through Capricorn, with Saturn and Pluto, which I feel like are the most, I don't want to say serious of the planets, but they have the most, in my personal opinion, to do with like karmic patterns and extreme transformation. And so for me, when I was looking at this, I was like, oh, this is also a retrograde season where we really do a lot of like karmic healing, ancestral healing, and like just reviewing of really big blockages that are just in our way of not allowing us to move forward. And I was like, oh, the more that people take the time to do that karmic clearing now during these retrogrades internally, and they say, all right, let me do a past life regression, let me do a shamanic clearing, let me take selenite and portal over my body, like let's get these boulders that are really in the way, especially boulders within our ego, within our solar plexus, and shove them out of the way so we can find more of a bridge and more of a harmony and alignment, so that we can get back to our core values, so we can get back to the work that we're supposed to be doing, and instead stop doing this and really opening up our perspective. So the fact that we're all in this together, you know. Yeah, we may have experienced trauma individually, we may have experienced ancestral, you know, twists and turns in different ways, but at the end of the day, we've all made this karmic agreement together to be here now, you know, and things are happening so intensely globally that, you know, with this Capricorn energy, it's saying, where's our foundation? Where's our structure? Where are we coming from? And so really I would take this summer to say, all right, what is holding me back? What are these chains that are dragging me from not just flying and taking my wings free? So find your wings.
Yeah, another element of that too, a couple of things planetarily, because the planets are, it's kind of like these are the cues that the universe is giving us and the opportunities. It's showing us where the doors are open. And the Jupiter in Scorpio aligned with Neptune in Pisces, these are 2 water signs. This is like purification, and especially with Jupiter in Scorpio, it's about, Pluto rules Scorpio, and so it's about transformation. It's about allowing ourselves to be bathed, allowing ourselves to release the stuff that really is no longer serving us. and that we're finding is an obstacle. And so that is really supportive energy that in terms of doing our inner spiritual work and getting more aligned with spirit, that's very strong. And then the other thing is that in May, just a few, 6 weeks ago, Uranus moved into Taurus. Uranus moved into the earth sign Taurus, and Uranus stays about 7 years in one sign or one house. And so it's beginning a whole new cycle, and it's bringing another major outer planet, transpersonal planet, into the earth signs. We've got Saturn and Pluto doing the heavy-duty structural work, and now we've got Uranus going into Taurus, which is the other earth sign, and that's also calling us to look at what's going on and see what do we need to change. How can we restructure our lives, and how can we look at things differently? How can we approach things from a different point of view, and in regard to transforming structures of seeing, okay, what works in our society and what doesn't. And okay, if we had a chance to redo it, how would we redo it? Uranus is the planet of revolution. It's the planet of renewal and of creating change and letting go of tradition.
That's why we have a French flag now.
Another R word, I know. I have a whole list here to say.
Right, there you go.
Yeah. So, I know that Richard has to leave a little early today. So before we start questions, what I'd like to add also is that if you would like to know, where some of these planets are falling in your own personal charts, Richard is our resident astrologer. Madeline is our new mini astrologer, I guess. She's our novice astrologer. So, please contact either one of them. You can contact them through the Crystal Matrix, or on their own website. I know you each have a website. What is your website?
Golden Sun Astrology.
Golden Sun Astrology.
Yeah.
Okay. .com.
Yeah.
And yours?
You can find me on Facebook and Instagram as Jupiter Rising Astrology.
So I would just throw that out. And then do you have a...
I don't really do, I keep saying I don't really do astrology. I don't do astrological readings per se. So I do a lot of lunar stuff and things like that. But this is not my main bailiwick.
I didn't want to exclude you. I think these two people, if you want to know about your own chart, this would be an excellent place to start, especially with what is going on for the summer. So I'll kind of close with this before I open it up. Then it sounds as if with the Capricorns and everybody involved this summer, it's like a big astrological party, right? Okay. Beach party bingo. All right. It's like we're getting an intergalactic view to see who we really or truly are. That's how I kind of see this. It's like we are more than our physical components. And I think the illusion that is our limitation is we're here to break that right now. We came here at this point in time on the planet to help each other remember who we are. And and this is a great time to do it. Have friends, it's important, because it could get messy, I'm sure. So, but it's time to wake up, and I'm glad I came. I think most of the time it's like, well, I think I understand why I chose to do this, but it's really pretty good. So, do we have some questions from the audience? We'd love to hear from you. If you have
Okay, to summarize real quick what you were saying there is have fun, but pay attention.
And don't let yourself on fire.
I just want to say, Madeline said something about wings, and you're wearing that raven wing in your hair.
Oh, yeah.
Am I correct?
It's not raven, but it's okay.
Not raven? Okay. Richard had just done my chart 3 weeks ago, and right after that, the following week, I moved to Sedona. But I was on my way, before I moved to Sedona, I was on my way to Malibu and came across a dead crow.
Okay.
Anybody who knows me, I'm walking crow. Well, while I was taking it home and doing ceremony with it, I was told, oh, you've got your wings.
Okay.
I was given my wings to soar. Because that's what my chart was really about me. Everything you guys talked about, coming into the self and everything that I'm doing right now is all about the bigger picture,
Okay.
the lineage picture, all of that stuff.
So Richard was very accurate for you then.
Yeah.
Madeline was
So
talking about with the ancestors.
Yeah.
yeah, and then last week I'm on my way to ceremony on Thursday. This week on Thursday, and boy, did I get confirmation with another crow.
Okay.
I mean, I wasn't questioning anything,
Right.
but Creator, Great Spirit, knowing who, the planets knowing who I am, there it was again, just to remind you, just a reminder that to soar and don't ask questions.
Okay.
The wing. I've received my wings, and
You have wings, you can fly now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you talk about having friends. I plugged in with Richard. There it was. In fact, today I took it. I was trying to read it, not knowing that I was going to come here today and experience this. So I pulled the chart out today because I'm going back tomorrow
Wow.
to Sedona. So thank you for being here and sharing all this information, because it's just light confirmation of what's happening and what I'm seeing and the understanding that I have, even without the planets, my knowledge of the
Okay.
planets. It's in front of me. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right? Yeah. Questions? Yes, sir.
I have a few.
Good.
Firstly, I guess maybe some of the easier ones. Is this unusual or different to have this number of planets going retrograde at this time, and in these particular signs?
It's not unusual. This is normally retrograde season within the year. You normally, especially the outer planets, I spend quite a bit of time in retrograde because they're so much further away from the sun that they don't have much of a gravitational pull that's keeping them in their direct orbit. So oftentimes you'll find, Jupiter always goes retrograde around the summertime. Jupiter has a 13-day transit time between each planet, and it normally takes up around the summertime that it retrogrades through that constellation. And so normally the summers are that time, which is very interesting considering the fact that, on the social level, we have, summer breaks, people go on vacations during that time. So I wouldn't say it's unusual. Considering the constellations that they're in, I mean, it's not unusual, it's just the signs that they're transiting through. But to have this kind of conglomeration in this dance is usual because it's kind of the blueprint of what we're going through, and it's kind of a roadmap for what's happening both internally and externally for all of us.
So
I would say also, just to clarify something, that the planets don't create what's going on. They transmit energy, they're transmitters of energy, and we are influenced by it, but it's how we deal with the energy. And so as the planets go through different signs and create different aspects, relationship to each other, they're kind of tuning in. It's like tuning in an old-fashioned radio or something, that it's dialing in different frequencies. And we on Earth, this is part of the cosmic evolutionary scheme, that these energies are for our own growth and evolution, both individually and collectively. And so there's no real repetition, that you could pick any particular summer and you'll find that there's a number of planets that are retrograde, but they won't be in the same signs that they were the previous year or 5 years or 10 years earlier, and they won't be in the same relationship to each other. And
So they would be affecting us in a different way.
in a
than
different
they're
way.
doing this
So
summer.
it's always different. And even if you go back to when some of those planets might have been in the same signs, you could go back 30 or 40 or 50 years, like Uranus went into Taurus. The last time Uranus went into Taurus was in 1934. It entered Taurus. And so there are some similarities, but there's going to be differences. The other planets are in different positions. And so the kind of the frequency that's created is calling something different, calling forth something different than what happened in 1934 through 1941. It was a different time period. So what we're experiencing is different. There may be some similarities, but there's going to be a lot of differences. And so that's kind of how the cosmic evolutionary scheme of things works from an astrological standpoint.
So the lunar eclipse has really, even though that's in there too, it really doesn't
Yeah, that's like the moon. The moon is a very fast. It's the fastest moving planet astrologically speaking. It's every 30 days the moon makes a complete cycle through the zodiac, and so it's got a different energy. It's much more rapidly changing, and so its effects aren't as long term as some of these other planets. When you've got Uranus taking 7 years to go through one sign, and the moon is going through one sign in 2.5 days. So it gives us these little hits, and this is the moon is a water planet, and it's connected with our emotions and feelings, and so this is where the idea of the moody moon comes from. It affects our mood more because it's constantly kind of changing the energy, but it happens quickly, so we're not stuck with it. But some of these other cycles, we're in for a long time with some of these other cycles.
Well, and we have 2 eclipse seasons every year, so yeah, it's not even remotely unusual. So.
And your third question?
Yeah, so I guess in a way maybe you've answered it, because I was thinking if this configuration could be looked at in the context of whatever it might be leaning towards, for humanity or whatever. Does this sort of thing mean something, direct something towards something? What is that something? When is it? Sort of a thing.
Did you get that question?
Yeah. Well, again, we're all of us are on an evolutionary journey. We're on our own personal journeys of growth, and then collectively we're also on a journey here as humanity on planet Earth. And looking at what's going on the planet, if you consider that in the last 150 years, the world population has quadrupled, we have to conclude, okay, there's something happening here. We have 8 billion people on the planet when 150 years ago there were only 2 billion people. So there's some kind of big shift going on the planet that's part of our evolution. But I wouldn't venture to go any farther than that, other than to say that it's happening and we're here, so obviously we're supposed to be here as part of our experience and part of our growth, both individually again and collectively.
One thing that really hasn't, it's been kind of tapped around, but I want to throw it out, is that, and I think it relates to the question that you were trying to pose here, is that we are all interconnected. There is not a person on the planet, there is not a single or electromagnetic object on the planet that has a life force to it, and that includes the planets, that includes the stones, that includes the planet that we're on. Everything is I'm going to say intergalactically connected, but it is. It's electromagnetically connected, and because of that, the intensity of these 8 billion people, the intensity of that, we're all operating off of one another constantly. Now we throw the planets and the magnetics that they exude, they're throwing that piece out into the potpourri that we're sitting in. And so it all gets mixed up, and what I say or do, it affects everyone sitting here, but it affects everyone who doesn't even know that we exist here. Because, quantum theory has shown that we are all truly interconnected. So to have this intensity of the planets at this particular time, especially with the fire signs, which just on their own are always just intense. I'm a water sign, and it's just, oh God. But anyway, do you understand the intensity of all of that? We need to be very introspective and cautious and kind right now to ourselves, so that we can reflect that back out, I believe, for others, because as I reflect it to you, you will then reflect it back to me, you will reflect it to someone else. If I go crazy on you, you're oh my gosh. Do you understand? It's like we need to become conscious. And the planets and the manner in which they're setting themselves up is asking us to come out of that illusion and to become conscious. We are spiritual beings, riding a very large spaceship, in physical form. And we need to be respectful of that. You know, and I think that's why we like to get together and, you know, we have fun here because we get to respect one another and be conscious of one another and call upon that consciousness. So, you know, quantum theory also says that there is no space. Space is filled with everything. So it's really crowded. It's more crowded than you might have thought. So that means that we're affecting so much more than we even realize. And I don't think I have anything else to say after that.
I think that says it all, really.
Yeah. So, you know, it's a blessing always when you come to join us. We appreciate it so much. Thank you. Were there any other questions? Are we good? You good?
I have one.
Yes, love.
Kind of. One of the R words that came up was
Yeah.
release.
Okay.
Now, as soon as I heard release, I'm like, oh yeah, that would be a good thing to do. But you're doing something, it's an action.
Oh my gosh.
So it's like, okay, it's regular, you really should do it. But maybe just think about things that you need to release,
Yeah.
per se, right?
But you're not
There you go.
moving forward, you're releasing something that's old. That's the trick. That's the key to the retrograde is you look at the old things, you look at any old projects, you don't look at new projects. The releasing is something that is within you, that's a program, that's an old program that you let go of. You can't get rid of something new. You can't, I mean, you can eat a hamburger and, you know, puke it out an hour later, you know, but like it's...
I don't recommend it.
Yes. You know, it's more about looking at...
But that is
you
still
know,
releasing something that's old.
You're right.
It's an hour
That's
old.
still
Yeah.
Mercury retrograde actions.
Yeah,
Okay.
so Mercury retrograde doesn't mean not taking action. It means being
Don't
selective
start a new
about
thing.
your actions so that you're paying more attention to reviewing stuff and taking care of things that maybe haven't been taken care of rather than initiating.
Yeah.
That's what you
spring
want to avoid.
cleaning-ish, where you're like gathering
Yeah.
things, but you're not going to take them to the good
Right,
building.
like, and that's why they talk about not signing contracts
Yeah.
and
Right.
not starting a new deal or doing initiating a project or something like that, to
Yeah.
just wait, because chances are something's going to get messed up in that
Yeah.
energy. Like when you were talking, Madeline, it was reminding me. I remember this friend of mine came to me and this was last year, and he was ordering a bass guitar online. Okay, he's a musician, and he looks for unique instruments, and so he saw this bass and he ordered it. Then he came and he said, you know, I think Mercury's in retrograde. Should I have done that? And I said, well, it really probably would have been better to wait if you could have waited. And so he got the bass about a week later, and it came and it was cracked. You know, I mean, it had been smashed in shipping, and it took him weeks to get it straightened out. You know,
Shipping deals with travel and communication.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because that's the other thing is that what you'll end up doing is it's not the end-all be-all if you do something during Mercury retrograde, but you will end up spending 3 times more time fixing what went wrong that you had planted in there. It would have just been easier to wait another 2 weeks.
Less concrete things, more abstract things.
yeah.
So I think we've reached our limit. Thank you very much, Richard, Madeline, Natara, and thank you all.